Jaya Gopi Janvallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Janvallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tire Vanachari Yamuna Tire Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jagannathai Jagannathai Baladevai Jaya Subhadra Jaya Radha Vallabha Radha Vallabha Shri Radhe Prabhupada 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 Jai Prabhupada Namo Vishnu Paramahamsa Pariyacharya His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Śrīmad Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Naranam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraye Nasta Praishvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike. So we are reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 12. Mohini Murti bewilders Lord Shiva. Verse 23. Tasya karhagrat satu kanduko yadha Tasya karhagrat satu kanduko yadha Gato viduram tam anuvrajat striya Gato viduram tam anuvrajat striya Vasa sasutram lagu maruto aharad Vasam sasutram laghu maruto aharad Bhavasya devasya kilanu pashyatah Bhavasya devasya kilanu pashyatah Tasya karhagrat satu kanduko yadha Gato viduram tam anuvrajat striya Vasa sasutram laghu maruto aharad Bhavasya devasya kilanu pashyatah Mataji. Tasya karhagrat satu kanduko yada Gato vidurantam anurajatstriha Vasa satsutam marutoha Bhavasya devasya kilanupashyata Tasya tahara gratsatu kanduko yada Gato viduram tamano rajatstriya Shakaramata Gato viduram tamano rajatstriya Sasatram Translation Tasya of the beautiful woman Karagrat from the hand Saha that too but Kanduka the ball Yada when Gataha had gone Viduram far off Tam that ball Anuvrajat began to follow Striya of that woman Vasaha the covering dress Sasutram with the belt Lagu because of being very fine Maruta the breeze Aharat blew away Bhavasya while Lord Shiva Devasya the chief demigod Khila indeed Anupashyata was always looking. Translation When the ball leaped from her hand and fell at a distance, the woman began to follow it. But as Lord Shiva observed these activities, a breeze suddenly blew away the fine dress and belt that covered her. There is no purport, so we'll continue with the next verse. Verse 24. Evam tam rachira pangim darshaniyam manoramam drishtva tashyam manas chakre vijantyam bhava khila. Thus Lord Shiva saw the woman, every part of whose body was beautifully formed, and the beautiful woman also looked at him. Therefore, thinking that she was attracted to him, Lord Shiva became very much attracted to her. Purport. Lord Shiva was observing every part of the woman's body, and she was also glancing at him with restless eyes. Thus Shiva thought that she was also attracted to him, and now he wanted to touch her. Om Agnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurue Namah Shri Caitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Caitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarvabhyasya kripa sindhubhaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So here we are seeing this pastime of Mohini Murti manifesting, and the Lord appears as Mohini Murti to bewilder the demons, and then Mohini Murti is able to give Amrita to the demigods, and about to leave at that time, Lord Shiva, who is having a desire to see the woman form of the Lord, approaches. And when Lord shows him that Mohini Murti form, even Lord Shiva becomes bewildered. So here as it is seen that Lord Shiva is seeing the woman, and we'll see how Lord Shiva becomes bewildered and chases the woman, wants to touch her. So first of all, let us understand who is Lord Shiva. Is there echo here? Is it too loud? It's okay. Okay. So Lord Shiva is Sambhu, who is originally in the Vaikuntha. Who is he? Is Sadashiv. And that Sadashiv is Lord Vishnu himself. He is a Vishnu Tattva. He is not a Jiva Tattva or Shiva Tattva. He is a Vishnu Tattva. Original, it is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita as well as the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and in Laghu Bhagavatamrita it is mentioned that he is a Vilasa Avatara of the Lord. He is none other than the incarnation of Lord manifesting from Sankarshan. So he is a Vishnu Tattva, and his consort is Ramadevi in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha Loka. And when he manifests into the material world, he comes as Sambhu. And Ramadevi, who is sent by the glance of the Lord Mahavishnu, and then appears into the material world as Lord Shiva and Parvati or Mahamaya. So Lord Shiva being bewildered by Mohini Murti is not possible in the normal situation. So this is, we have to understand, it is a pastime. The Lord Shiva is put on, he is under the Yogamaya potency, and this whole pastime is to show us that if Lord Shiva can become bewildered, anyone in the material world can become bewildered. Thank you. Now it's, I think, proper. There was an echo I could see. So, and we will, as the pastime unfolds, we will see how Lord Shiva or Mohini Murti goes to different places where the rishis are there, sadhus are there. And just to show that the potency, this woman potency in the material world, the lust is so powerful that even Lord Shiva, who is the topmost Vaishnava in the material world, topmost human being in the material world, if he can get bewildered, anyone can become bewildered. So we have to understand he is Sadashiv, who is in the spiritual world, he is Vishnu Tattva. And when he comes into the material world, there is Shiva Tattva. He is not the Jiva Tattva. Like Lord Brahma and everyone else down is a Jiva Tattva. But Lord Shiva is not a Jiva Tattva. So there is no chance of him being bewildered. But as Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajoguna, Samudbhava, Mahanaso, Mahasano, Mahapapam, Vidhi, Enam, Iha, Vairinam. This lust is the topmost enemy of a human being in the material world. So let us understand where does this lust come from? So originally, and it is also mentioned in the spiritual world, there is lust also. In the spiritual world, Narad Muni is saying, Gopya kamat bhayat kamso. So the gopis are attracted to the Lord by lust. So this lust is there in the spiritual world. And even Nectar of Devotion mentions about this. Kama Rupena and Sambandh Rupena. There are the relationships in the spiritual world are through lust and through relationships. The attraction in the spiritual world for the Lord is through lust, through relationships. So, what is the difference between the lust in the spiritual world and lust in the material world? In spiritual world, the lust is to give pleasure to the Lord. There is a definition in Nectar of Devotion. The definition of pure devotional service is given. What is the definition? Anyone knows? What is the definition of pure devotional service? Bhakti. Anya abhilashita sunyam gnana karmadi anavritam anukullena krishnanu silanam bhaktir uttama. Uttam bhakti or topmost bhakti or pure devotional service, what is it? Anya abhilashita sunyam. There is Anya abhilashita. Abhilash means desires. In material world we all have desires. But when abhilashita, the ta is added to those desires, it's not the desires but it's the motivation behind the desire. So Anya abhilashita sunyam, when the motive behind those desires become zero, which are tainted by gnana karmadi anavritam, to enjoy into the material world or with philosophical speculation. Anavritam. Anukullena krishnanu. So everything should be favorable towards Krishna. Krishna is the center. So when that devotional service is performed which is favorable towards or centered towards Krishna, even though that is lust, but it is pure lust. It is love, it's prema. It's not the lust we see in the material world. In the material world, lust is basically to satisfy one's own senses. How can I get some pleasure out of it? That lust is materialistic. But in the spiritual world, the lust is how can I serve Krishna? How can I give pleasure to Krishna? There are two words mentioned. Aham mameti. So what is aham mameti? I and mine. But in the spiritual world, that same aham mameti becomes, aham becomes, I am yours, you are mine. Mamatva. Twadyanam and twadyam and mamatva. So I am yours and you are mine. So that I and mine, aham mameti, gets transformed into I am yours and you are mine. When that happens, that lust, the same lust becomes love, prema for the Lord, because Krishna is the center. Krishna is the pleasure seeker, or one works in the direction of giving pleasure to Krishna. So in material world, Krishna is saying this is lust only, O Arjuna, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. We all come into the material world, and as soon as we enter into the material world, why do we come into the material world first of all? Because of the desire to be separate from Krishna or to enjoy as Krishna is enjoying. So there is some kind of a curiosity in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, there cannot be envy. So one has a desire, what it would be like to be like Krishna, what it would be like to enjoy like Krishna, and that desire just brings us, gives us a tour into the material world. There was a movie, Jurassic Park. So nobody would like to live in that park, but everybody would like to go and visit now and then. Especially when in that movie it was shown like when the animals just became, they broke the cages and they were roaming around. Nobody would want to go into that park. So it's not a place where you want to stay, but it's good to have a tour if all the dinosaurs and everyone is caged, not set loose. So similarly, nobody wants to come to this material world. But when we have this curiosity, what it would be like to be in the Jurassic Park, then we are often given this tour. But it is mentioned, so there is a curiosity in the spiritual world which brings us here. And as soon as we come into the material world, what happens? We are covered by Mahamaya. We are covered by avidya, ignorance. And that puts that seed which was there, curiosity to be without Krishna or to enjoy without Krishna, that gets converted, bijam gets converted into sinful activity, papam. It is mentioned in Nectar of Devotion, first chapter. So that seed, one has a desire to do different things, enjoy, and it gets converted into papam, sinful. He acts onto that desire. So when one acts onto that desire, what happens? He will get punya and sinful reactions, which can be pious reactions or sinful reactions. And that will create aprarabdha, unmanifested reactions. And then it gets manifested, which is prarabdha reaction, and which further culminates into kutam, which is proclivity to commit further sins. So there's an example given. There was a long time ago, I saw one movie which is like in the 60s movie, black and white movie. It is a story about a jailer who sets 6 prisoners. He wanted to test, so he sets 6 prisoners out, and these are hardcore prisoners who had some of them had committed 10 murders, some of them have committed 20 murders, 40 murders, killed so many. So these are hardcore prisoners, and he wanted to do some experiments. So he brought them out and made them to do farming and all those things, building house and things like that. So when he brought these prisoners out, the first night he gave them the nice beds to sleep. Those prisoners could not sleep because they were used to sleeping in the chains. So what do these prisoners do? They again removed all the beds, the nice cushion and beds and everything, went onto the floor, and there were all these equipments for household things. So they tied all those things to their hands and legs, and then they could snore and sleep. So this is the conditioning which these prisoners have, and we are having similar conditioning, and which is kutam, which is the conditioning when we come into the material world and we go on life after life, we become conditioned to live in a particular way. And that conditioning is basically we forget Krishna. That love for Krishna become converted to lust. The attraction which we had for the Lord becomes transposed to attraction for our own self. So that devotion which we had for the Lord becomes covered. And it is mentioned there are 6 obstacles to bhakti. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Maya, Matsarya. So what is this? Kama is as Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, this is enemy number 1. So first we become attracted to the desires, the kama, and when we enter into the material world. And when that kama is not fulfilled, we all have got desires. And this kama it's not only towards the opposite sex or to the person, it can be to many, many things. It can be to many, one can be attached to a car or property or many other things. It's all part of lust. How can I get enjoyment from these things, material things? How can I get enjoyment from this person? So kama can be in many ways. So when this kama is not fulfilled, because we all have got desires in the material world, and when they are not fulfilled, what happens? We become frustrated. Anger arises. Krodha. As Krishna is saying in that verse, kama leads to vrat, krodha, anger. But if the kama is fulfilled, if we get what we want, then what becomes? Greed. We want more. Because whatever amount of fuel you supply to the fire, kama is like the fire. If you supply any amount of fuel to the fire, what will happen? It will not extinguish, it will ignite more. So when that kama is not fulfilled, it turns into krodha. But if it is fulfilled, then it gets converted into greed, lobha. And whether it's frustration or greed, anger or greed, eventually they both lead to moha, delusion. One becomes deluded. If we are too greedy, we don't see what is going to happen later on. We may, out of greed, people do some investment or do some things and then they lose all the money. They think I'll get more. They go into casino out of greed. One day I will win, but they lose everything. And even in anger, when one is angry, he cannot think properly. He will say things which one should not say. So as it is mentioned, when you are angry, don't say anything. Because you usually will say things which you will regret. Why did you say that? So both lead to moha, delusion. And then moha, after you are angry or you are greedy, when pride comes in, it becomes mada, intoxication. You become successful and you become intoxicated with that pride. And then later on, envy, matsarya. So these 6 enemies are the obstacles to bhakti. So one has to understand that, as Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is mentioning in the beginning verse, Janmadi asya yatha anvat ishtrasya, the origin of everything is Supreme Brahman. So the origin of this lust is also from the spiritual world. If it is not in the spiritual world, then it wouldn't be in the material world, but it is the perverted reflection. It is the opposite. So, further in Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned there are 3 degrees of lust. So, what is the first degree? The fire covered by smoke, the mirror covered by dust, and embryo covered by the womb. So, these are the 3 levels of lust. The topmost or the fire covered by dust is the lowest degree of lust. So, when you see the fire, it has got, smoke covered by the fire covered by the smoke. So when you see the fire, there is smoke. So that is called the lightest level. You can see the fire still. And it is said that in the material world, the human beings are like that. They have got a chance to advance in the spiritual world. So advance in bhakti. They have got a chance to see, because the fire is still seen. And then the second example is given of the mirror covered by the dust. So when you have the dust covered on the mirror, if there is a closed room, the room is not open for a long time, you'll see the layer of dust on the mirror. And you can still see the pratibimb, the reflection, but it is not clear. So it is the thicker level. And it is mentioned this is like the animals or beasts. They have got all the senses, they have got the good consciousness, but they still cannot understand the spiritual path. So they cannot perform devotional service. They can only perform if somebody from outside helps them. Like if you give prasad, like we have got a dog at our farm, he only eats prasad. So like that, even though he is in that animal body, but still because of devotees' mercy, they can still advance in the spiritual. And we have got a pastime in in Caitanya Charitamrita as well. So where a dog goes back home, back to Godhead. It is by the mercy of the devotees. So they still have a chance. And the third level is embryo covered by the womb. And that's the thickest level of lust. And the example is given of the trees. Trees have got consciousness, but their consciousness is very limited. They cannot advance or they perform devotional service. So it is difficult for them to perceive devotional service. So it's interesting how this pastime and Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is speaking about lust right from the beginning, speaking about the dangers of material world right from the beginning. So in the first canto, at the end of first canto, Parikshit Maharaj asked this question, how can one be delivered, especially one who is in the material world? How can he be delivered? How can he, and what kind of activities can he perform? And immediately Sukdev Goswami, when he begins to speak, first of all he glorifies the questions because it is beneficial for everyone. And then he speaks about grahastha life, grahamedhi life, which is like the dangerous situation in the material world, because they have got the license to enjoy their senses in one way. But it is interesting now, Sukdev Goswami himself is a brahmachari. He has nothing to do with, he was renunciate. He has nothing to do with grahastha life. Parikshit Maharaj was going to die in 7 days and he is prepared to sit there and listen for 7 days and night. He had nothing to do with this. But still, as soon as Sukdev Goswami speaks, the first thing he says is, Sruttavadini Rajendra Nirnam Santi Sahasra Apashyatam Atma Tattva Graheshu Graham Medinam. He speaks about Graham Medis, those who are in the household life. He said, it is very difficult. People who are in the grahastha life, it can be like a razor's edge. It can be different because they've got a lot of, they have to deal with the outer world, and there are many subject matters which can bewilder a grahastha life. So it can, a person who is at home can easily become a grahamedi. And then he continues, Nidra Hariyate Naktam Vyavayana Chavaya Divacharte Rajan Kutumba Bharhanenama. He said the lifestyle of a person who is a grahamedi, what is it? In the daytime or at night he is Nidra Hariyate Naktam. He is sleeping or indulging in sex life. And in the daytime he is making money or maintaining the family members. So this is the position of a grahastha. And then he continues, Deha Patra Kalatradishu Atma Saina Shiva Savapi Tesham Pramato Nidanam Pashyan Apina Pashyati. And because of that activities, Pashyan Apina Pashyati, he cannot see. He is dependent on Deha Patra Kalatradishu. He is dependent on his body. He is dependent upon his wife, his children, his bank balance and all this adishu, on all this paraphernalia. And he cannot see what is coming up. What is coming up next? It's like the goats in the slaughterhouse. They have been given some food to eat. They're busy eating those food grains, and there is a chopper going at the other end, and they're moving forward, and they are thinking we are enjoying this food. So the grahastha life is like that, or life in the material world is like that. One can keep enjoying, but pashyan apina pashyati. There is danger which is coming. Life is very short. So, but again, there is hope. So Sukdev Goswami then in the next verse mentions that one who desires to be free from all the miseries, he must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. So just by hearing about the topic, and this was one of the questions which Parikshit Maharaj had asked, what one should hear, chant, worship, whom one should worship. So here Sukdev Goswami is answering. So, but the interesting point is he's mentioning about the grahastha life. One has to be very cautious in the material world, and then one should worship here and glorify and remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the key. There is another pastime which comes in the middle now of Bhagavatam. So this is at the beginning. In the middle there is a pastime of Maharaj Priyavrata, which is just at the beginning of 5th canto. So now Maharaj Priyavrata was the elder brother of Maharaj Uttanapad. But he had renounced. He did not want to get into the material affairs. So he had renounced the kingdom. He had taken shelter from Narad Muni under the instruction of Narad Muni. He was performing devotional service. And then when Uttanapad renounced and that lineage was finished, then Lord Brahma approached Maharaj Priyavrata to take up the grahastha life, to help in the progeny, to help in the ruling of the universal affairs. So at that point, Maharaj Priyavrata was reluctant at that point, because he had already renounced and he understood getting into the material life is a dangerous situation. He might become entangled into the material life. At that point, Lord Brahma is mentioning this. Jitendriya yasatma rater buddhasya grahashrama kim nu kuroti avadhyam. Even if one goes from forest to forest, if one is not self-controlled, must always fear material bondage, because he is living with 6 co-wives, the mind and the knowledge-acquiring senses. So one can renounce the world. So Lord Brahma is telling Maharaj Priyavrata wanted to be in the forest. One can renounce the world, but if he does not have control over his 6 senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the mind, then he can be bewildered. And further he's saying, even householder life, however, cannot harm a self-satisfied learned man who has conquered his senses. So if one is in the householder life and he has conquered his senses, he's better than a sannyasi. That's what Lord Brahma is saying. A sannyasi who does not have control over his senses and mind. And he's saying those senses are like 6 wives. A sannyasi can live with 6 wives, whereas a grahastha, even living with 1 wife, can be renounced. So Lord Brahma is saying that. And later, next verse, he's saying, Keshinu kamam vicharet vipaschit, one who is situated in a household life and who systematically conquers the mind and the 5 senses, is like a king in the fortress who conquers the powerful enemies. So one who is a king with a powerful army and has already conquered the enemies, he is compared to the man who has controlled his senses. After one has been trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger. So interesting point Lord Brahma is making. So one who has controlled his senses, he can move anywhere without danger. But one who has no control over his senses, even if he goes to the forest, he is in a difficult situation. He is moving with his 6 wives. So like that, he's convincing Maharaj Priyavrata, and then Maharaj Priyavrata gets into the Grahastha ashram and enjoys the Grahastha ashram for 1,000 years, and then again renounces. So this is the story of king who, Maharaj Priyavrata, who understood and he was self-realized, but then performed his duty and again got out. And it's interesting, when I was reading this section, the first thing comes into the mind is the Ninth Canto. And I always wonder why all these pastimes are mentioned in the Ninth Canto, which is supposed to be the end of Srila Prabhupada makes this point. If after reading the first 2 cantos, the lust has not gone from your heart, you should repeat them. So, when we come to 9th canto, which is like and from 10th canto we see Krishna appears. So, in 9th canto we see this chapter after chapter, there is pastime which deals with lust. Right in the beginning, there is a first chapter which speaks about Sadyumna, who is a son of Vaivasvata Manu. Vaivasvata Manu did not have a son, so he performed a yagna. And he wanted a son, and Vasishtha Muni performed his yagna, but when the child was born, she was a female. The female child was born, Ila. And then Vaivasvata Manu is confused. What is happening here? I performed a yagna for a boy, but the child was born. And then Vasishtha Muni mentions like your wife had a desire for a girl, so a girl is born. So he prays to the Lord, asks Vasishtha Muni to convert him somehow. So they do conversion, transformation. And now we can see this gender transformation is not coming now. It has been there from the beginning of the yugas. And so this girl Ila is transformed into a boy Sadyumna. And then once when this boy is grown up, is going with his associates into a forest, he enters this forest where Lord Shiva and Parvati, it was a private forest where they used to have their pastimes. So as soon as Sadyumna and all his associates enter into that forest, they all became women. They get converted back into women. And then Buddha becomes attracted to Buddha becomes attracted to Sadyumna in the woman body, and they have a child, Pururava. And now the interesting story, there is in the same canto, 14th chapter, it is mentioned, Buddha is the son of moon god who had kidnapped the wife of Tara, who was the wife of Brihaspati, and then impregnated Tara, and then Buddha was born. So all this pastime we see are all in 9th canto. And then Pururava and Urvashi pastime comes. So many pastimes, Sukanya and Chavana Muni, again those pastimes. Chavana Muni, by his yogic power, becomes young to enjoy the sex life with Sukanya. Then there is a pastime of Saubari Muni, who had a desire to marry the daughter of Mandhata king. And he marries. When he went, he goes to the king and asks for, King Mandhata had 50 daughters. And he asks King Mandhata, can you give me one of your daughters? I have a desire to marry. And then he was looking old. So King Mandhata saw it's not appropriate. So he said, my daughters have a free will to marry whomever they want. And then by his yogic power, Saubari Muni converted himself, transformed himself into the best of the demigods, young and handsome. And when he went in front of the 50 daughters, all the 50 were fighting to marry him. So, and they married him. And then Saubari Muni enjoyed with 50 daughters of the king. And we see the whole 9th canto is speaking about these things. So why is it that just the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada is saying, if you are not overcome, you have not overcome lust after first 2 canto, come back to first canto and read the first canto again. And then it's at the point where Krishna pastimes are going to start. And all this pastime, someone would say this pastime should be before first canto. They shouldn't be at the end of the entire Bhagavatam. You are going through all this pastime. But we see right from the beginning till 9th canto, Bhagavatam is warning us. You have to give up this attitude. You have to give up lust. Unless you give up lust, bhakti will not arise within your heart. So unless we come to 9th canto and we still are getting lusty desires by hearing this pastime, we should not approach 10th canto. That is the point. By the time you have come to 9th canto and hearing this pastime, they should create virakti. They should not create. So there is there are two things, vairagya and virakti. And so what is the difference between vairagya and virakti? Anyone? Vairagya means detachment. We become detached. We try to control our senses by detachment. But virakti is frustrated detachment. We are frustrated with this. We don't want anymore. Who was Yamunacharya, right? He said that's spit at the thought of having a sex life. So that is virakti. So one should, when one is coming to 9th canto, he should have developed this virakti. He should have developed, he is frustrated with all these things. And then he can enter into the pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna and hear those pastimes with prema rather than material lust. Okay, I'll stop here. Are there any questions, comments? Okay, we'll stop here. Granth Raj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.